Hello, and welcome to the Project Good podcast. I'm your host, Annmarie Hylton. Project Good is a social impact podcast interviewing experts and advocates about the pressing problems that we face globally and hearing how they suggest we move forward in the future. The Project Good podcast is brought to you by Project Good Work. The goal of this podcast is to inspire people and organizations to develop a mindset that can move others to positive action regarding the complex social issues facing people and the planet. For May, we're discussing leadership with a spiritual impact. Many people across sectors, politics, business, faith communities, climate work, technology, and social movements would say we are living through a period where global leadership is being tested at a moral and spiritual level, not just a political and economic one. Several spiritual elements appear to be shaping this moment simultaneously. Number one, a crisis for meaning. Who and what can be trusted? Fear and wisdom. Are we working towards the common good? The collapse of the hyper-individual. Pandemics, climate instability, supply chain disruption, displacement, and social fragmentation reveal how interconnected humanity really is. A hunger for ethical leadership. Where is their accountability these days? Technology is outpacing wisdom. The craving for the return of the spiritual language in the public life. And suddenly, there's a real look at the global transition of leadership. People are hungry for a movement away from transactional leadership to a transformational leadership. And then a lot of people have been mentioning that this is a spiritual battleground around attention, with the majority of the population suffering from information overload. And lastly, we find that hope is either still hanging on by the thread, and people are hoping that it's getting bigger. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Reverend Kevin Taylor, a pastor, leadership advisor, and author of the book, A Charge to Keep, a book exploring the real weight of authority and the decisions leaders must carry alone. Drawing from years of experience in ministry, executive leadership, and organizational governance, Kevin helps leaders think more clearly about responsibility, courage, and the costs of leadership. His work focuses on helping leaders move the decisions that they've been carrying into action with clarity and integrity. Kevin is passionate about conversations that help leaders steward influence faithfully and lead with greater wisdom. Let's get into the interview. Do you feel it? A shift is happening in the world on a massive scale. What used to work in economics and communities and politically in our everyday lives is being re-examined by all generations. It's time to wake up and understand how we're doing things and how it's going to impact you. To help us explore the possibilities, I have leadership expert Reverend Kevin Taylor to walk us through. Welcome, Kevin.
Hello, and thank you for having me, and hello to all of your podcast listeners.
Yes, I'm very excited about this conversation because I think it's the key as we're facing a lot of things. It's, the year 2026. From a global climate perspective, there's the 2030 goals. So we're only 4 years away from there, where they have all these goals to fight against poverty, turn around economies, and essentially save the planet. So we are on a, I guess you would say, ticking time bomb in a way. But before we get into all of those details, I always like to understand the person who I'm interviewing and how they became who they are as a human being, and also to understand their heart and how they see the world. So what would you say, as you were developing from your childhood to now, was your driving factor that made you choose the different paths and career routes that you did in your life?
So I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan, so home to the university, go blue. I didn't attend the University of Michigan, though I was accepted. I attended instead Tuskegee University, an historically black college or university. I was an exchange student to Hakone, Japan between 7th and 8th grade. Hakone is Ann Arbor's sister city, and every other year, 10 to 12 students would travel there, and students from Hakone traveling to Ann Arbor. And so I was there for 18 days. Homestay was with 3 different homestay families. And for me, it was an opportunity to be able to see and broaden my horizons, to be able to see the world in a different way. And I think that experience, coupled with the fact that I grew up in Ann Arbor's largest black church, those experiences really helped shape who I am. So going to a HBCU was second nature. My parents both met at an HBCU. My sister, younger than me, graduated third in her class from an HBCU. So that was second nature to me. But it was from that experience and with the knowledge that the world is a much bigger place that made me comfortable leaving Michigan, going to Alabama, leaving Alabama, going to California, and then ultimately coming to New York, where I really got a chance to see urban ministry up close, but not in the way that I thought. And so I thought that I was going to be understanding how we were reaching people who were homeless, like the homelessness that I saw in Los Angeles. But I actually discovered that the work that I was called to was actually education. And my mom being now a retired teacher, my sister almost 25 years in her school district. So education was in my blood, but not in the same way that it was for them. So classroom teaching wasn't my goal or my gift. Instead, the administration and ensuring that the policies are in place. And so it was through that lens, through an international experience, through an HBCU experience, through living in major metropolitan cities, that really has shaped my understanding of the moment that we are living in, but also our global responsibility as citizens. And so with that, I join you today. With that, I've written a book. And with that, I think that today's conversation will be enriching for you and I and for your listeners too.
Yes, that's a very interesting background, how you essentially, got to travel as a young person. And I guess you got to see the different perspectives of how people were living in different areas. And then also the fact that you were in big cities, and you're in, cities in California and New York. And those are, I would say, obviously melting pots of individuals and different ranges of incomes and communities and obviously cultures interacting, which is, I think right now what we're seeing on the political stage, the the big, I guess you would say, elephant in the room of how do we then, with this mix of people and cultures and communities and, and faiths, since you're coming from the faith background, how do we, come together and move forward in a positive and enriching direction? So it is the definite topic of, I would say, of this time, but I think for like, our process obviously forward in a path. So your background is perfect for this discussion. I guess the first thing, it's sometimes, here we are in the U.S., and so we have, this separation of church and state. And for those listeners who are outside, that was one of the founding principles here of the U.S. But we are finding, though, that originally, or I guess it's not even finding, knowing though that even our laws that were put in the Constitution, they did have a basis off of, I guess you would say, a Christian background when they were formed. And so right now, the big thing in the U.S., of course, is everybody is, I would say, for lack of better terms, confused about where these lines are going. What do we believe as a country anymore? Um, the U.S. used to be looked at as um, uh, a nation of morals and direction and um, I always kind of used to envision us as the superhero or the Superman of the world, and I think a lot of people did. But now, I think that, of course, is wavering with the recent political arena, the policies, and just how we're showing up in the world. And so, my first question for you is how do we look now, like how should we look at where we are from a spiritual perspective in the US? Like, is do you feel, I guess the first do you feel that our spiritual path here in the US is dying, or where is it?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and I think it's particularly relevant in the year that America turns 250. And so, as we look at the greatest nations in the world, 250 is still an infant in comparison. And I've been writing a Substack every other week that really calls our nation to account for as much progress as we think that we've made, how much more progress is needed, and the thesis or the statement that I will be able to conclude the series with at the end of the year is it's okay to be critical of the government, but what are our responsibilities as citizens to demand of our government the type of change that we expect to see? So in terms of whether or not our spiritual Judeo-Christian roots are expiring, I think I think the broader question is, and what are we doing and how are we living our values, both in the persons that we elect to leadership, but also in the policies that we expect them to adhere to. And I think it would be wrong if we identified in any one religion where it is okay to ostracize the people that don't look like us, and the us being whatever the dominant culture is, but instead to be able to say there are opportunities for us to be able to learn from one another, and for our histories and experiences to be celebrated, and for our diversity to be strong. And so we will see this summer images of America and American flag and Statue of Liberty and all of those symbols of excellence and greatness and a beacon in the world. But if our policies don't match those definitions, or they don't match that imagery, then we have not come as far as that we think that we have. And so one of the premises of my book is that you don't have to check your faith at the boardroom door, and you don't have to check your business acumen at the church door. And even if your listeners are not actively religious or not actively involved in corporate or nonprofit management, it is true that who we are and how we have been created and the passions that we have belong in every environment in which we are in. And so to divorce or to pretend or even to hide behind any one of those things as we approach the conversations with others is to deny that those other attributes exist. And so I have no plans to run for office, but if I were advising a political candidate, I would say, is what you're doing aligned with what you believe? And to the citizenry, to the members of my congregation, to the people that I work with, I'm asking the the question, are you going to the polls and voting for the person or persons who are best representing your interests and representing your ideas and your values? And if the answer to that question is yes, then great. But I believe that more people would respond no to that question, and that is partly why we are in this situation now.
Yes, definitely. I agree with you. I think right now, what I see is like, well, and this is just me having conversations, just out and about on the street. It's very hard to get people to even nail down anymore what they believe. I've noticed that, and there is um, I guess you would say a fear has developed of choosing to say, this is who I am and this is what I believe. So it's an interesting mix though, because even though people are like afraid to say, this is what I believe, there's also this movement in that uh I guess the anything goes at the same time. And what I mean by that is that, okay, so I don't want to say that, I'm in box A or box B, but then I don't want you to tell me like if I feel this way about a topic, like let's say right now, just because women are under the microscope, like there's a strong movement right now to look at like, what women are doing. Are they, do they still belong in the traditional kind of 1950s setting where they should be at home taking care of children, and being there for their husband, spouse, provider? Or can women be more, go out there and be the CEO? If they want to be a mom, great. If they don't want to be a mom, not to be criticized. um uh you know People want to have this like box that says like, let me do what I want, but I also don't want to tell you exactly what box I'm fitting in, because I have a fear. I don't know if you've been seeing that yourself.
No, I think it's right, and I think it is a unfortunately in the environment when we live, that fear feels real, and when someone might tweet about your differences or your job might be on the line, then you are less likely to be able to um, bring forward your actual views. But I think that's part of the problem, though, is that we are hiding behind what we actually believe. And so, to the point that you're making about women specifically, I am a feminist. I believe that women are empowered to make the decisions about their bodies, about their lives, as they see fit. Not everybody is going to be a stay-at-home mom. Not everybody is going to be choose not to have children or to choose to have children. I think we have to ask a different question around, and so is the reason why there are the rate of children being born in America lower, or the rate of marriage lower? Is it solely because women are in the workplace? And I would say no. It is. I think that we value the life in the womb, but when the child is born, the services that would be available to support the child's growth are harder to come by. And college is expensive, and raising a child is expensive. And so, what then are the ways in which we are making it possible for people to both be married, to have children, and for the lives of their children to be better than their own? These are all real questions that both women and men are facing, and that is showing up in the birth rate. Now, it's not what we talk about when we talk about the birth rate. We talk about other things, but I think the humanitarian, the humanistic, the feminist, the I just care about people side causes us to be able to ask different questions than what we are being presented. And I think that is That is important. But to your point about fear, if I say that, am I going to be ostracized? If I say that, am I going to lose my friend group? If I say that, will I lose the number of followers that I have in social media? If I say that, will my congregation walk out? And I think we have to get to a place where naming the thing is the most important thing, and not dancing behind it and beating around the bush, but like just saying it. This is what I believe. Here is what I believe is right or wrong. And that when I say it, that doesn't mean that you not believing it makes you my enemy. It simply means that we have a difference of opinion, but we can disagree without being disagreeable, and we don't have to agree on everything to be able to work together. And so I think that fear is also rooted in the idea that if I am not on your side, then you perceive me to be my enemy, and I've got to do everything that I can to be able to bring you down. And I think that's not the way it is, that two people can disagree and can move on with their lives, and that we don't have to agree on the same things. We have to agree on the things that are most important to us.
Yes, and in how you were explaining, kind of the situation of the reason why people might not, why the birth rate is going down, that it isn't just that, I'm going to be a little funny that, women are over men, but that there are like, economic factors, there's the support factors. But I think that is the thing that we are hiding in all of these issues. I think that's the what has happened now is that everything in previous generations, it used to be a little bit easier because obviously there were less people on the planet. Resources were a little bit more plentiful. We didn't have this mass connectivity with technology, and there was the ability to, I guess you would say, stay in your like separate countries a little bit more. But now it is all colliding, and because everything is now, I would say, more. Um, I'll use the word open market, because now you can access, different ways to think from, you can be here in California, but, learn how they're thinking over in, South Africa or something like that fairly quickly. Um, and because of that, now we're avoiding the real issues. Before it used to be, I would say, more black and white, like, if we're going to fix this problem, we do A, we do B, we do C. But now there are so many intertwining factors because of all those things, of the technology, the influx of information from, different communities and cultures, and the decrease of resources, that now when we look at problems, I believe almost people are avoiding them because they want to go back to the like, it used to be just like we do A or B, but now we really have to look a little bit more because there's so many things that are, I guess, that we realize that are more interconnected than they were previously. And so I kind of believe that is like the real situation that is causing, I would say, this examination kind of on a moral level, like the way that you used to think as a person, um, sort of no longer can be, or you have to expand your mind um, from the silo that you've been living in. I think that's the times that we're really facing. Um, And so, yeah, and yeah, I think that's really, I believe, that the crisis that we're facing, because I guess you would call it like, I guess, like cognitive dissonance in a way, that, the way that we were in our own communities and our own countries, this is the way that it was. And we just, we didn't question it. But we find that that reality is not necessarily true, and the way that the future is looking, if all these things are right about the climate, and where where the young people are going from, being influenced by technology, we have to think completely different than we ever have before, which I believe is causing a mental and the spiritual crisis. I guess, have you seen that?
Well, so I absolutely have, and I think that's I think you hit the nail on the head. I think I think what we are seeing is, and what people have become to believe is that all of this is a zero sum game, right? Like that there are only so many available, X, Y, or Z, and if you have more than I do, then there is gone. And I think that that's the wrong way of thinking. And so, in your introduction, you talked about the different things that America is facing. One of them you named was, technology being greater than where we are, the human capacity as of now, and that is a very valid point. But like if we look at the institutions that we are expecting to hold against these things, we've been at 9 Supreme Court justices since the 19th century, and the 435 representatives since 1913. And so we look at those things and say, well, wait, America was like 30 million people then. Now we're more than 300,000 people, 300 million people. Why is it that we have not added people to the House? We don't need to be bothering redrawing anything. We need to be thinking about how possible is it for 435 people in the U.S. House to represent the interests of 300 million. How is that possible? How is a 9-person Supreme Court able to interpret laws that would govern 300 million people? And so, do we need to have 15 justices, 30 justices? Is it time to have 500 members or more than closer to 1,000 members of the House? And I don't have the answer, but it is to be able to say that the more diversity we have, the better the opportunities we have in order to be able to make a difference. And so it was when women were elected to the House that there were focuses on the maternal health issues like childcare that have come about. And so, but again, diversity of opinion, diversity of mind. And so we've got to be thinking about what would happen if there was greater inclusion and how that would allow people to come. And you're right. I see it on the church side too, because we have traditional ways in the Black church of thinking how children should behave and what our buildings should look like. And the reality is that as children are growing and have access to other things to do on Sundays, if we're not focusing on making sure that our service is timely, that there is space for the children to be children. People are coming with autistic children, and those children need room for expression. And so if the building is not designed for that, or if the service is not open to hearing from new forms of worship, then you're going to lose a generation of people who you are expecting to take the seats when the existing members have gone on. And so so this is not just a United States problem. This is a individual choice problem. And so when I choose not to stand up and say, this is what we need to do, or I choose not to say that my child is struggling or I am struggling and I need a faith place where it is okay to not be okay. If we aren't able to do and say that, then we deny ourselves the opportunity to be healed of that. And that is what's happening in our nation, from my perspective.
Yes, and so I guess there's of course the fear factor, but then of course, as everybody is aware, we have these. I'll just say these opposing. They're opposing parties, right? They're opposing parties, but there's these groups. There's the strong right and the strong left. But even if it's not a political thing, there's the people who want to, I would say, stay in the tunnel vision. Like, it doesn't have to change. We just, people they just need to read their Bibles and or start go back to how it used to be, and we'll be fine again. It's just that these people, they want to jump off the path. And then there's the other people who are like, well, let's just open it up to everything. And I haven't seen really a happy middle. I guess, how do we get to the happy middle? Because in my opinion, we need a little bit of both. Like, technology is not going to slow down. We that you know I we have what soon to be many trillionaires, right? They're not gonna just say, oh, let me throw it out, and I'm not gonna run my tech company anymore. So we see AI is coming, and who knows what comes um, next after AI. I don't want to be here maybe after that one, but um, you know, uh, well, that's not going to slow down. The children now are obviously exposed and don't know, especially the young ones, they don't know a world without technology. So we can't really turn them back to, um, you know, uh, the 80s. And then we have these changing economies generate, and we have multiple generations now because people are living. It's not unusual to live to 100 now. So we have all these complex problems. So we can't go just down the tunnel vision road, and we can't just open up everything. How do we get to the middle? What would you say is your suggestion?
Yeah, and I think the way to get to the middle is a recognition that the middle represents the things that both of us can agree on, right? So I'm dating myself, I am sure, but back when we learned symbol math and we learned about Venn diagrams, you would draw two circles, and the places that there was overlap would be the places where there would be things that were true for both of those. I think that's the middle that you're talking about, and that is where do we have our commonalities? So look, I'm a Michigan football fan, but that does not make me hate Ohio State in the way that some people do. And I'm not going to hurt you over your stance on the football game. When the game is over, it's over, and we will live to play another game next year. Okay, but what we have in common is that we both love college football, or we both love Big Ten football, or we both love to be able to be in the fall air. And so there's more that we have in common than we have that are different. And if we can work together on the things that are common, we can then find that there is room for diverse groups of people. But when it is an either or, there is no middle. If there's an either or, and if I am not in control, then you are going to make it look like what you want it to look like. And if you are not in control, then I won't ever have a chance to do what I want to do. If we are not working together, then we are not going to we're not going to be able to move forward. And so in my book, I use this example of, like, if you're if you're married and you ask your spouse, what do you want to eat tonight, and maybe he responds Chinese and you respond pizza, and and you guys end up having Indian food. Well, like, is that anybody's fault? Is that anybody's concern? The Indian food came and maybe it was not as good as you want. Like, we don't go back and say, well, we should have got pizza, we should have got Chinese food. No, we agreed that the Indian food was the way to go, and that is what we were going to move forward with. Can we compromise, come to a place where maybe you didn't get what you wanted and I didn't get what I wanted, but we both got a chance to eat? And what was more important was not what we ate, but the fact that we could eat, and that we were able to dine together, and that we were able to be together. And that is what's more important than you got your way and I got my way. If we get to this place where we can begin to say, though you have a different opinion than me, that does not make you my enemy. It simply means that you are a person with a different opinion. I'm not saying that my opinion is more right than yours. I'm simply saying that I am of this mind, and I'm willing to hear you out on what your opinion is. And if we can come to some agreement about what the basic facts are, then we will be able to move forward. It is the absence of doing that. It is It is the polarization, to the point that you were making, that makes it so that the Venn diagram seems harder to achieve. But as a math minor, I just believe that it is possible, and I have to hold on to that hope, because if I don't, we're going to see more political violence all over opinions, and I don't want to see another January 6th. And I don't want for that to have been a dress rehearsal for what it will look like if a particular group does not get its way again.
Yes, I believe these are like exponentially challenging times if anybody looks at going into leadership now, because you describe, and I'm going to use kind of I'll just say it seems like spoiled children fighting, essentially. And so we need to get over the spoiled children because we have some serious issues. Number one issue, obviously, is we need to make sure our planet survives. Because without this place, well, good luck. Right? There's not anything to really fight about. And so we really don't have time right now to be fighting about these petty things we have to worry about, that we're going to have enough food for the next generation. Like, that our food is actually nutritious and not poisoning us because we've let, plastics get out of control and it poisoned all the, groundwater and soil and everything like that. We need to think about, what is this movement towards AI really going to mean for people in developed nations and undeveloped nations? How is that going to, play out? There are bigger issues at hand. And so what kind of leader is needed for the future?
Well, so you're absolutely right to all the points that you made, and I think that we are waiting for Superman, and we are waiting for there to emerge one person who will be able to galvanize everyone and to be able to meet everybody's needs. And I'm just here to say that person doesn't exist. What we need instead is the leader that is going to be open to understanding that not everyone is going to agree to everything. And so you will not be able to please every interest group. You will not be able to cater to every individual person's desire. You will instead be able to move the needle in ways that will be able to protect everyone's right going forward. So we just need a leader with an open mind, a person with the proven track record of being able to work across lines of difference, a person with the track record to be able to show that they do not have to be right all the time. The type of person that is willing to say that if it was a success, it was a team effort, but if it was a failure, it was my failure. I think those are the types of people that we're looking for. But listen, that's not just at the presidential level or at the federal level at all. I mean, certainly we look to that within our governors and our mayors and other local municipal elections. But those are also the type of people that we want as neighbors, right? That we want as our children's teachers, that we want as our friends, people who are willing to be able to see past the things that make us different and to be able to live accordingly. It is always amazing to me that on the playground and at the lunch, with in the gym and in the other essentials that students have, that children are able to play across lines of difference. Like they're not worried about the things that separate them. They are just willing and interested in being able to play and to be able to have fun together and to be able to learn from a diverse group of people. Like that's okay. And I'm not saying that we have to have a childish way of doing things, but I do believe that the a childlike approach to getting along and being able to say that you are my friend, and that I want to come and I want to play in the sandbox with you, or let's go on the monkey bars together. Like that level of openness to new ideas and new ways of doing things is what is demanded at the federal, state, local, and again at the hyper local level of in our families, in our neighborhoods, in our children's classrooms. That's what's going to make a difference, because your city council member, has aspirations for, state office, and your state office holder has aspirations for the nation. And your nationwide, or your federal, person has aspirations at the presidential level. And so that person who is your neighbor might very well be your president one day. Just like, I say to, congregations all the time, every pastor that you have, good or bad, came from the pew first. So you don't know who that person is that is in your church school class, or is in your faith group. You don't know who they will become. They might be your pastor one day. And so you want to treat everybody with the same level of respect, so that when those persons rise to whatever it is that God has called them to, that they are still true to what it is that brought them, not to the ambition and to the fame or fortune that they thought was a byproduct of their choice.
Yes, and I believe that's been like the number one challenge of the U.S. as of people being able to see each other on an equal playing field. And I guess, and I'm going to lead this into a faith question, because I think faith puts people on an equal playing field. And because we're all, obviously none of us are God. So we are on an equal playing field. And I don't know if people, really understand and look at that. And I guess what would you say is the importance of faith in leadership?
So, so my book is written from my perspective as a pastor of a Christian church. That does not mean that I don't have Jewish friends, that I don't know people who are who subscribe to Islam, that there are people who are Buddhist, other leaders, to allow their decisions to be shaped by their faith as well, and not in the idea of proselytizing, but in the idea that if in my faith I believe that people should be treated fairly, or I believe that I should do unto others the way in which they would do unto me, then even when we're having a difficult conversation, I am open to hearing your perspective, because that is what I would want done for me. And because I also understand the world in which we live, I want to be sensitive to the situations that might be emerging for you in your life, and so I want to make sure that the benefits plan reflects the ability to be able to seek mental health, or to be able to provide for you as you go care for your aging loved one. Like, I want to make sure that the offerings that we have are holistic, in order for it to meet the needs of the whole person, because it's the whole person that I want to show up at work. And so, but that's, my faith tells me that. The economic realities tell me that that is also what I need to do to be competitive. But the fact that I would extend to you an extended COBRA if you were separated from the organization, or that your severance package would be generous, or even that I wouldn't protest your or contest your unemployment. Like, those are all things that are consistent with the faith. And so allow your faith to be able to show up in who and what you do.
And and right now, I guess you would say, because of all the challenges that we are facing, of course, the next important thing is hope. And I think right now a lot of people, just not only just in the U.S. but just across the world, are struggling with having hope of specifically for the future, maybe not, on different things, but I think the future, at least how they portrayed in the media, how we're all heading towards I would say the Terminator era uh, uh, of robots and AI and more and more things becoming less personal and and you becoming more isolated due to technology. So I think a lot of people are they're fearful about where we're going. So I guess what should people look at to have hope?
Well, so I think that the hope can lie in the fact that technology can be a force for good if we are willing to regulate it in a way that it is not exploiting those persons who are most vulnerable. There was a time when the television was this big box that almost looked like it was a piece of furniture in a person's house, and depending on your age or age range, before there were remote controls, there were children who were responsible to go to the TV to turn the top or the bottom to be able to get to the channel, right? And there was, my parents say, a time when the television would go off. Literally at midnight, the Star Spangled Banner would play, and there would be no more TV. Now our TVs can curve, can fit on the wall. There are 24-hour news channels. You can buy whatever you want online, right, or on from the TV. There was a time when the U.S. mail was the primary way of being able to communicate, and now we're at email, and the cost of stamps continues to rise. There was a time when, in order for you to be able to hear your favorite song on an 8-track, you had to keep driving, or to be able to rewind your song on the Walkman, you had to flip it over, fast forward, and then turn it back over and play. And now you can download images or download video and download your music immediately. And depending on the service that you use, the song that you like will then suggest other things to be able to do. I say that to be able to say that those are the technological advancements that we are all aware of. Parents being able to see their grandchildren because of Zoom, and people being able to connect with people from their past because of Facebook and because of other social media. And so those are all good technological advancements. And I think that AI can also do good if we let it. But what we also learn about social media is that we learn that social media's algorithm preys on vulnerable children, many of them girls, and the effects of social media on children. And the regulation of those sites was self-regulated. Oh, we'll do it ourselves. But the government didn't step in to be able to do that, and now we're dealing with the effects. The question that we have to ask about AI, and I ask this question through the newsletter that I write on a monthly basis on LinkedIn, is where is the governance that's associated with the things that we're enjoying about AI? If you're using AI to write a contract or to be able to write your, to be able to write your paper, are you required to disclose that? And if you aren't, please understand that you are still responsible for the outcome, even if you are, using AI to produce whatever it is, because AI can't think for you. It is a thought partner if that's how you choose to use it. And so when I say things like we need to be thinking differently about whether 9 people in the Supreme Court is enough, or whether 435 people in the U.S. House is enough, it is look at all of the issues that we are now being faced with that in 1913, when it was 435 people, we weren't even concerned with, right? Like at that time, like World War I had not happened. We've lived through 2 world wars, numerous skirmishes around the world, on the verge of World War III, and all of those things being true, but like we're dealing with the same number of people. So like in 1913, those people were representing, 70, 80,000 people. Today is closer to each person representing 600,000 people. And 600,000 people is six Michigan stadiums all filled to capacity, and one person is supposed to represent the ideas of all of those people. I think but again, the nuance of the situations, the circumstances, the way in which AI will impact the different parts of our lives. And look, AI has been here for a long time. It's how Google has made it so that when you type in something, you've given that you're able to get the results. AI has been in your Amazon cart because when you buy one thing and it suggests to you 25 other things to buy, some of which you actually do, that was AI working to be able to think for you. But those were for good. What happens if the computers get ahead of the people and the computers turn on the people? And I'm not a sci-fi fan in any sort, and I'm not trying to put a plot together for a movie, but if we aren't willing to be able to say, hey, wait, we've got to get ahead of this, then we are going to be in trouble. And so while I know it was a disruption to us a few years ago that the Hollywood actors went on strike for so long, and it was detrimental to that industry for as long as it was. What the actors were saying is that we do not want AI images of ourselves or our voices to replace us in the movie. And look, there are some AI imagery and some AI voice work that you would be surprised is not the actual person. And the actresses said, oh no, this cannot happen for us. And so they were willing to work with the major movie producers and television producers to be able to say, no, this is what the limitation would be. That is the type of work. I'm not saying the strike, but I'm saying the idea that we have to get ahead of the work and understand where it might go and what the impact might be, because otherwise we're going to be left behind. And the reality is that if you are not working a job where you're talking about these things, or you don't have children or grandchildren that are, keeping you abreast of these things, that technology is leaving you behind, and that's putting you at a disadvantage, and it's putting our nation at a disadvantage in this global world. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but as you can tell, I'm very passionate about this because we have a responsibility to one another.
Yes, and I think that's a perfect transition to talk about your book, Charge to Keep, because, I believe now being a leader, obviously has some of the same things, but I think it's much more complex than it used to be. So I guess how if somebody's put into a leadership position in a company, because companies are something obviously that people interact with daily. And so this is, the encounter that most people have, that they have to listen to, some kind of leader or leadership. But I guess how can you be a strong leader? And before we even get in there, I guess let's understand like why you wrote this book.
hmm So the book is written from the perspective of someone who has been in the trenches, and so a lot of books are that are on the shelves today are theory. This is all about practice and the lessons that I have learned. And so the subtitle of the book is Immutable Leadership Lessons from the C-Suite to the Pulpit. And I wrote the book because I know that I'm not the only bivocational leader out there that is struggling to or is working hard to be able to balance my church life and my work life, only to realize that actually God made me so that I could have impact in both places. And so I want to now show up as I've been called to do. And so that was the impetus, that the types of things that we're talking about are not necessarily the things that are talked about in the training to become a minister or in the training to become a C-level leader. And so I talked about one of the premises being that you don't have to check your faith at the church door, and you don't have to at the boardroom door. You don't have to check your business acumen at the church door, another principle, another reason for writing the book is that leadership is lonely. And so sometimes you can feel like you're the only person to ever experience the pushback, the change, the frustration, the stab in the back, the people who don't really understand your vision, whether or not you need to retreat or to be able to scale. You might feel like you're the only person that has ever experienced that. And so I'm here to say that leadership is lonely, but you don't have to be alone. You don't have to think that you are by yourself because, oh no, you've been through, there are others who have been through it. And so in this book, I put forward examples from both my pastorate and my C-level leadership to be able to illustrate these 12 principles. And I'll be honest in saying not all of them paint me in the best light. This is not where this is a celebration of Kevin's successes. And Kevin has made some mistakes, and here's what I learned from it. So the stove is hot, everybody. You don't have to touch the stove. I've touched it. It's hot. Take my word for it. Don't make my mistakes. Make your own. Well, that is why I wanted to make sure that the book was available, because I wanted for others to be able to learn from my experience. To your question, though, about someone who is starting and what do they need to know, the book walks through these principles that will help you. And from the book, I've developed a number of newsletters, including one that is called One Plants, Another Waters, that comes out weekly on LinkedIn. And the reason for that is you can be in a leadership position and your board chair, your CEO, your whomever hired you can give you a 90 or 180-day plan. These are the people that you need to talk to. These are the meetings that you need to attend. This is the work that you need to be able to do. Here's what success looks like. And all that's great, but nobody is going to pull you aside and say to you, now look, when you get to the job and people start talking in your ear, not everybody that is coming to talk to you means you well. And so you have to be careful that what you are hearing is calibrated against something that somebody else has told you in order for you to know whether or not what you are getting is true. Then you need to know that when you open your mouth, whatever it is that you say will be signaling to the people that were talking to you that you are on their side. And if you aren't aware of those dynamics, then you will be hemmed up from the beginning, and it's hard to get out of that. You might be of the mind that, oh, you are the best thing since sliced bread, and we're glad that you are here. So we can't wait to hear what you have to say in a board meeting. And you might not be aware that the thing that you say actually then decides the way in which people will believe in you from going forward. So I've written that newsletter with basis from the book to be able to say, here is the companion you need in order to go about understanding the work. I mean, this most recent issue talked about the idea that the organization takes the pace that you are working on as being the way it will go. And so if you are of the mind that you're going to get here and you got to put in extra time and you got to do this for, just until you get done. No, that's the pace the organization is going to expect from you from now on. So pace yourself in a way that allows you to be able to do the things that you need to be able to do, because otherwise that pace that you started on is the pace that everybody's expecting from now on. Those aren't things that go into your 90-day plan. Those aren't things that you are necessarily taught before you got to the job. Those are not things that, when you were getting that assignment to that particular church that somebody told you. And so I'm here to be able to say, hey, learn from me. Make sure that you're clear. And those lessons that are going into that newsletter come straight from the book. And so it really is learn from my experience, but also, oh man, I wish somebody had told me this. I wish that somebody had taken the time to break it down like this for me. And if you don't have a mentor, don't have someone that you trust, if there's not somebody in your family who has been through it before, then you can get some bad advice, and that bad advice can bite you in the butt sooner than you think.
Yes, and that's kind of, I would say, dual leadership, being a leader for yourself and then also being a leader for the people who you're working for in the company. Leading yourself down to this path. Because what I've learned in not only especially for like if you're doing like entrepreneurship, but also in when you get to the higher roles, that it's really not about the work, it's about who you become and how it's shaping you and how that projects out to, or influences other people. Which is, I think, the toughest thing, or the thing that people don't realize till maybe later, that it was never actually about the work. It was about how it shaped them and how they then influenced others through how they were shaped. Yes. And so that's what I've come to understand about leadership the most, and the thing that I think just from books I've read that people don't realize till the end, and they're like, aha.
Yep.
It was never about the work.
I wish someone told me. Yes.
Yes. And so just we're coming to a close, but since we are in I would say, a critical time, as we don't know, I guess, the future and how it unfolds, but I guess if the past is a predictor for the future, we could buckle up for some rough times in the next few years. So how do people because elections are going to be coming up, and not only elections, but I think outside of the U.S., the biggest decision on the planet is going to have to be made, and I think the biggest decision is going to be what I call is it, what does it mean to be a human? And so in that, what would you say is just because I just explained, I guess the leadership is not only just about having one person, guide the path, and a bunch of people following, because there are, I don't know, we're over 8 billion people on the planet, that we have to look at leadership at even a different level, that each individual has to be their own a leader. So how, I guess my final question is, how do we look at ourselves each as a leader on this planet to go into a successful, happier, and healthier future?
Yeah, uh, so it'd be a multiple fold answer. One is, I think that you're absolutely right. Past is prologue, and I think it was Mark Twain who said the past doesn't repeat, it rhymes. And so I think that it would behoove all of your listeners to study what America was like post Civil War, so the Reconstruction period, post the Civil Rights era, and now post the very first Black presidency. And you might begin to see some similarities, but also some ways in which we can begin to work together to avoid the past repeating itself. That's first. Second is that we can be the best we that we can be, meaning that while I can't change the world per se, I can change my square of the world. And I'm going to make sure that I'm influencing my friends and family to be open to the ideas that I'm sharing. And if that happens, and so if I change my square and you change your square, and the person that you love changes their square, that eventually the whole world's squares have changed. And so, to Gandhi's famous quote, be the change that you want to see in the world. The third thing I would say is that, our democracy is still young relative to other democracies in the world. And so when asked what type of government we have, it was Benjamin Franklin who replied, a democracy if you can keep it. And the question that we have to ask is, are we willing to keep it? Are we willing to participate and be a part of the change that is required? Are we willing to hold our government to account? But also, are we willing to ensure that we are participating in its success? The fourth thing is, if you are from a Judeo-Christian background, you believe that God made the world, made Adam and Eve, and that God gave Adam and Eve dominion over the world. Well, He gave us one world. This is all we've got, and so climate change is real, but in a very real sense, this idea of zero-sum game is going to be seen as the earth continues to warm and oceans begin to rise. And so it's not inconceivable that in the next, 15, 20 years, that we're worried about food supply and water supply, and we're worried about where people will live as a result of the changing communities. And this is happening in parts of the world, and we're just not focused on it. But like right now, we can't even agree that it's actually happening. But that said, there is going to be a need for these tough questions to be asked. And so if I'm restricting certain groups from being able to assimilate into America, what happens when those groups cannot go anyplace else, not because of violence, but because of the prevalence of water in their area or the lack of food? What will we do then? And so if we believe what we say at the Statue of Liberty, is that being acted out by the policies that we're putting in place? Because there is going to come a day where there are people who, because of climate change, will have no place to go, will have no food to eat, will have no clean water to be able to live in. And look, we already saw something similar with who got the vaccines in COVID-19 and who didn't, and how long it took them to get them. Is that the world in which we want to live? So as you are going to the polls, as you are participating in the economy, as you're having conversations with your friends and family, as you are discerning what social media sites that you are on and what things that you're going to post about, what you ate for lunch is okay. That's your choice. But are you willing to use your voice to be able to share about what is happening? Because your vacation destination might not be there. And so it might just be the pictures that you have that was an even possibility, because that place might be destroyed because of climate change. And those questions have got to be solved by people who are willing to come to an understanding that we have more in common than we have in difference. And we don't have to agree on everything, but we can disagree without being disagreeable. And so those four things is how I would leave this conversation, and I hope that your listening audience would appreciate as well.
Thank you, Reverend Taylor, for your time and insight. To find out more about Reverend Kevin Taylor, go to revkttaylor.com. If you have a passion for an unserved community, a social justice problem, or want to change minds, contact Project Good Work at projectgood.work to start your project of change today. Subscribe to our mailing list at projectgood.work/subscribe to get our episodes and blog articles sent to you each month. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to Project Good. We're focused on what matters.